Hello, welcome to Gary's Garage. Today we have the Acura 2002 Acura EL, which is the same as 2002 Honda Civic, really, other than trim and bits. We've got a few jobs to do to it today. First up is the wheel bearing on the front right. So we're going to cut quick to the chase, get the car up in the air, get the wheel off, and then we'll get started. Different than the last Honda wheel bearing we did, instead of using the press, we're going to be using a tool where we pull the bearing out and install a bearing on the car. I don't have a hub tamer or whatever, but I do have a puller that's designed for large bushings like on Volkswagens. So it just happens to be really close to the size, so we're gonna use that to do this bearing on the car, and that'll make it go quicker. Anyway, thanks for sticking with me. So to get started, we need to be able to free up the hub so that we can get the axle, the drive shaft, out of the hub. Then we can pull the bearing out. So we want to free this up, and we don't want to damage the brake hose or the ABS sensor. So the first thing to do is to take these off. This is a 10mm socket. Hopefully, in your case, if you're doing this, these come off easy, because when you have a plastic sensor and a rusted bolt, it is a problem. Just a little guy. And let me get my tray. I got my magnetic tray. Bad shot. I didn't think that would be possible, but somehow it is. Okay, keep track of the bolts that you take out. I'm going to take this guy off. This is this little bracket that holds the ABS sensor wire onto the knuckle, because if it's all flopping around, I don't want these wires to get pulled. If you're taking these off and you feel resistance, put a little bit of penetrating oil on it just to lubricate it, and you can go back in if you have to until you get it loose. You don't want to snap a bolt, and you've got a big job on your hands sorting that out. Okay, so that's the two 10s, short one at the back, long one for the sensor, so that's good. Now, this is the part we don't know if it's going to be good or not, is pulling the sensor out. We may not be able to take the sensor out if it's rusted, and you get these plastic parts in metal, and what happens is the water gets in through capillary action, gets in between the surfaces, the metal rusts, and as the metal rusts, it expands and tightens around the plastic, and the plastic just doesn't want to come out. The only way to getting it out is breaking it, and we don't want to have to replace the sensor. So we're going to have lots of slack on the line. Hopefully, if this doesn't look like it's going to come out. So we'll do some more checking later. Next thing up, we're going to loosen the brake hose. I believe this is a 12. Now this one, I don't like the feel of that. That is tight. All right, so I think we can put some heat on it without damaging it. So let me just get a few things. Okay, so trick here is I've put a little penetrating fluid on this, but we want to make sure that we don't get any heat on the pipe. So have the flame going away from the pipe. Got a little bounce back there, but hopefully you can see. I'm using MAP gas. Propane generally doesn't have enough energy to get the heat that you need. There we go. Piece of cake. Now we don't have a broken bolt. This brake line will be out of the way. And of course, once you've heated, make sure that you have your gloves on when you're handling the bolts. You don't want to burn yourself. Pretty obvious stuff. There we go. So let's get this caliper off next. Good. Now, you don't have to take the caliper off the caliper holder or caliper bracket. You can just take the caliper bracket, the full assembly, off, and then just hang it up with a hook, get it out of the way, and that'll give you access, but it'll also you know, get it out of the way without having to take more apart than you really need to. All right, here we go. I'm gonna need, so let me set up, I think it's a 19 and a power bar. All right, so I don't know how well you can see, but there's this bolt here and there's the one at the top, and those hold the caliper bracket on. I don't want this to be in the way. Try this location, how's that? That's good. All right, I don't always use power tools to take stuff off, because while you're doing this, you can feel the bolt and see if there's any problem, any binding. Oh, that's tight. Trick, if you're using 6-point sockets, you can relocate the socket to have an increment like if it was a 12-point. You'll get yourself in the right position. Now we're off. Let's buzz that out. A little bit of speed. This is the part where you can pull and push to get the clearance you need to get this off. I'm going to put it on top here, and I'm going to grab that hook and I'll reposition the camera. All right, so I just made these, but you can buy caliper hooks. Find a good place to hook it. The spring is a good place to, if you can get the spring, the hook over the spring. There we go. Good, and then we can pretty well get this out of the way. There's no tension on the hose pipe. We're good. Now we can work on getting the rotor off. To do that, we've got a couple of these large Phillips screws. Sometimes these can be a bugger. These front brakes were replaced not too long ago, so this shouldn't be too bad. Let's get this light repositioned, and let's see if we can pull those out. This is a number 4, number 3. Yeah, I think it's a number 3. Anyway, no matter. Make sure you get the right size. There we go. Probably should have done this before I took the caliper off, because the axle turns pretty easy, and you got nothing to brace it on against. There we go. Piece of cake. I kind of know that I kind of knew that these would come out easy because I did these brakes 3 years ago. I think it was about 3 years ago on this car, and so this is. And at the time I put some anti-seize on the back. Don't see any left, but anyway, all came off good. All right, we're getting along pretty good now. So
So the next thing we're going to need to do is loosen this bolt. If you're going to do it with an impact, that's the best way to do it. You can just undo it without releasing the locking tab, or you can try and release the locking tab with a small screwdriver. So we're going to do that, and then I'm going to get the big socket on there, and the gun. This gun, I'm using my low power gun. Might have to use the other one. We'll see. And everything is in pretty good nick here, actually, for a 20-year-old car. The plates are good. So let's get going here. This is a 32 millimeter impact grade socket. I've got an adapter. This is my small gun. Oh, that's not going to cut it. Well, let's use the other gun and see what we can do. Okay, so this gun is a little bit more powerful, although it's worn out. I don't use it because it leaks air, but and my compressor PSI is a little low. But there we go, just enough. So the nut is now loose, and the axle slides easily inside the hub. So now we can pull that ball joint off, and we can move on to the next step. All right, so to take the ball joint off, this is a castle nut. I don't know if they're all. I think this is a replacement ball joint. Actually, come to think of it, I may have actually put it in some time ago. You can reuse the cotter pins if you get them out without damaging them. I may just replace it. I have a stock of cotter pins. Yeah. Cotter pins, always a pain in the ass. That's not happening either. Okay, so I've got a pick I think with the pick I can get through the hole, the eyelet. And then drive it in. Now, this is like deja vu of the last wheel bearing I did, where the cotter pin on the ball joint rested on the inside and didn't want to come out. I had to drill it out. What a pain in the ass that was. So we're going to put a little bit of heat on this and then get it out. Alright, I had to go all the way to the side cutters, and the side cutters, because they bite into the steel, you get a really good grip. So I was able to pull it out. Of course, this is gone, straight in the trash. We'll replace it with a new one. Now let's get a socket on that and we can get this off. Alright. Okay, let's see if we get the... So this is a 17, which is just like the caliper mounting bracket bolts for 17. I think I forgot to mention that. And there we go. Easy peasy. So usually when you're taking this off, you don't take it completely out, especially if you end up having to use a ball wrench tool. There's different kinds of tools. The way this control arm is designed, it's not like the cast ones where you can get a hammer on, just drift it on the side. Can't do that. So and you don't want to heat it and destroy the rubber, and you don't want to put a pickle bar in there unless you're going to replace this ball joint. So we're going to try a couple of different ways to see if we can. We're going to use a drift and a big hammer. See if I can shock this. If I get in on this, shock it, and then it should pop out. And if not, then we'll go to the puller. So let's see what we can do here. Drift bar placed right there. See it move. Nope. Sometimes you win, and sometimes you don't. Try it from the other side. And put some ear protection on. Oh, moly, that's loud. Yeah. You guys keep watching. I'll keep pounding. Alright, I went to started setting up the puller, and I just turning it in by hand, and the gap between the nut and the bolt just disappeared. I realized it was actually, we did actually knock it off, but because of the bushings, the rubber bushings on the control arm wants to be up higher, so we just have to take this nut off and we'll be good to go. So we're getting closer. Okay, let's see if we can just pull this right off even without taking the sway bar. Sway bar is not too big, so there we go. Just pulling down on the control arm. It's got this off, and then now we can push out the drive shaft from the back of the hub, because we can just pull it out. You can pull it out of the transmission if you want, but I think what I'm just going to try and do is just set it aside without, you don't want to have like too much load on the shaft at its extremities, so we just can get it out of the way. It's a good idea. This is a good time to inspect it. The rubbers look good. It's a factory one. It's got a balancer on it, and the teeth on the ABS wheel are in good shape. I'm going to clean it up, and we'll put some anti-seize on the spines before we put it back together. But now the hub is free, and we can get at the back of the bearing, and we can see that, and we can see that the hub is still in. So and then if we turn it, I don't know if you'll be able to hear this on camera, but yeah, that is the problem. It's not loose yet, but its days are numbered. So what we're going to do is, actually I'm going to stick this back on and just put the nut on, and then I'm going to use the slide hammer to pull the hub out. Once the hub's out, then we'll get that snap ring out, and we'll see if we can pull the bearing out without taking the whole hub assembly off. So let's see what we can do. Well, I have a bit of a fitment issue with the slide hammer. Really the spacing isn't exactly right for this hub. So I'm hoping that with a little bending, we'll still be able to get this off. I think it's coming. Doesn't move much. Most fun stuff in the world, that's for sure. Oh, that's a damn tight fit. These are supposed to come out a lot easier than that. So I've put some heat on it. I think it's starting to come. And there is the bearing. Woo! It's like going to the gym. Okay. Sorry, I missed a little piece there. My memory card filled up. I had forgotten to take the last video stuff out. Anyway, so what I've been doing, I couldn't get it off with the heat, so I used the grinder method. Use a grinding smaller wheel if you can. It'll help get in the corners a little better, and then you create a cross or zigzag pattern, and you don't want to catch the hub, but get it in as tight as possible, and then you go across. You do a slot across, and then you get a screwdriver, and then you just pound it until it cracks. So it's thin enough there that it cracks, and once it cracks, then you can just work it off. This bearing, pretty sure this has been done before. Because there's some damage on this part here. You can see where I've zipped in. Ooh, that's a little deeper than I wanted. But I think we'll be okay. So we're just going to clean this up a bit. The grinding wheel just touched onto that, so we'll just clean this up. This is previous damage. We'll get that cleaned up, and then we'll be able to put that back into the new bearing when we're ready to go. Here we are. Okay, next thing to do, to remove the bearing, there's a circlip here, that retaining clip that holds it in. So you need a pair of pliers. Nice to have a screwdriver at hand. Give this a squeeze, and then the usual problem is it likes to slip out. Sometimes you can just pull it out. There we go. Wow, that doesn't happen all the time. Usually got to get a screwdriver in behind to pull it out, but there it is. It's in good condition. I'm just going to clean it up with a wire brush and before reusing it. So now the next thing is to pull out the bearing. Alright, so here's the setup. This is not a bearing puller, this is a bushing puller, but I've got something that'll go behind the inner race. We're not trying to save the bearing, so it just needs to be smaller than a couple of these. We'll build it up big enough so that I can get the nut on that has the bearing in it, and I can whiz this on. Now I won't be able to get the bearing past flush with this setup, but I'm hoping that once we've moved it, once we've cracked it and moved it, that I'll then be able to use maybe a large persuader of sorts to persuade it the rest of the way out. But this will work to push the other one in, and I'm going to make sure that we've got it set up. I think I'm going to put the bearing on to chill in the freezer, and there we go. So let's see how we get on with this. Alright, so I'm having to hold the nut at the back. And turn the front. And we are moving. At some point the how hard I'm pulling here, we'll ramp up, and that'll tell me that we've moved the bearing as far as we can move it. I think I felt it there. Yeah, that's it. So we'll pull this apart, and we can see right there the bearing has come all the way out to the front surface there. So we are on track. We just need something that's a little bit more, a little larger in diameter, but the force has gone down so that it's not pulling as hard, so we should be able to get it off here. Let me set something else up and we'll shoot. Decided to go back to the slide hammer, and there's my T-pin. I'm gonna have to spot weld this thing back in. Alright. I think if we watch the edge, I think we should be able to get this out with the hammer. Yeah, it's coming. What I might do is just lubricate it. And do a little bit in the back. And it's back to the gym for me. Well, it looks like we've lost our balls. Well, that's going to be a bother, so I'm going to stop and take those off. All right, so I think we got a long way to go. Let's see how we do. And there's the bearing. All right, more cleanup time. We'll bring you back once it's done. So all I had to do is just wipe out the inside. It's actually pretty clean in here. I don't think we'd have a problem going in, and I don't feel any burrs or any problems at all. So I might just put the emery cloth over this to make sure it's nice and clean, and then I'm going to lube it up so the bearing slides in easy. Alrighty, and I think I can use my big bushing tool to draw this in, pushing on the outside race. I think I've got everything I need to do that. So let's set it up and see if we can get it in. Okay, I just thought I'd show you guys the condition of the bearing. You can probably hear that. So there's a spot here, a spot there. This is where I cut it off. There's another spot here, and I thought there was a little tiny one down there. This is the biggest one, and it might not pick up on camera, but there's some waviness to the surface of this bearing. So this to me looks like water egress. Water's gotten into this, and it's had a chance to sort of set and start to rust. And then as the ball rolls over the rust, you know, it does that. Maybe from being parked a long time. But I also suspect that this bearing, I looked all over it. There is no stamping, no number on it at all, on either either inner race or the outer race or anything. There's just no number on it at all. I could tell from the previous damage on the hub that this is not the original bearing, so it's been replaced once. I suspect that this is a low cost bearing that's been installed. So you know, it's just had another service life interval that goes away. But I also believe that every time you get into a car that has a wheel bearing, it's so commonly the front right, and I have a theory that if the car drives on the street and in a rainstorm, the water runs to the right side of the road, and if you're in the curb lane, you're splashing water up, and if the hub is warm from the brakes or whatever, you splash water on it, a pressure change can happen, and a vacuum inside the bearing could happen, and even just the smallest amount of water can get sucked in through the seals, and therefore that's the reason why this bearing fails before any of the other ones. Anyway, that's just my own personal theory about it. But so bottom line, stay out of puddles. Puddles seem cool, but they're not. They will cause component failure long term, so try and keep your car dry is the best thing you can do. If not, if it does get wet, make sure you get hot afterwards to drive out any water, and that should help out instead of just going parking it. Okay, let's get this set up. I've cleaned and oiled this now, so this is ready to go in. I got the bearing in the freezer, so let's set up the puller here, and we'll pull this in. All right. All right. So there's our new bearing right out of the freezer. SKF bearing. So we're going to put this in with the numbers facing back, so that without taking the bearing out, you'll be able to read what it is. There's no numbers on this side. I've oiled the inner surface, so this bearing is going to fit in there, and this has a lip on the outside, so we're only going to be pressing on the outer surface of this bearing, so keeping this centered, because it's not self-aligning. It's not self-aligning, so we're going to have to do what we can to keep it aligned by monitoring it. We can do that by feeling it or looking at it or whatever, because if it gets out of position, we could be pulling on the seal portion of the bearing, which we don't want to do. We want to only be pulling on the outside here. Okay, we're all lined up. It looks good. Now, it's already starting to go askew, so we don't want that. Okay, I've added a spacer. It's actually a wrist pin from a connecting rod. That's going to allow me to get this right in the center, and then I need the other part. Put it all back together. Yeah. We're good. Now that bearing is pulling straight in. That's perfect. Now, of course, for those that are observant, you'll probably notice that this cup that I'm using to push on the bearing is larger than the diameter of the bearing. So we're going to get to the point where once it gets flush, you won't be able to push it in anymore. So what we're going to do is use a trick where we use the old bearing. And I'm just going to stack it up. Now that there's enough room on the threads here, I should be able to stack up the old bearing on the outside here. And we'll use the old bearing to push in the new bearing. So it'll take me a minute to set up. Alright, there's a bunch of fiddle. Anytime you get a bunch of loose parts that you have to line up, you know, it's tough. But I've got it almost perfectly lined up. So I'm gonna pull this in until this sort of bottoms at this corner. It might just center itself. There we go. Just gotta be careful here. Get this too far off to one side is no good. The sound's changed. Oops. Might be all the way down. Anytime you're pulling, banging something in or whatever, you'll notice that when it bottoms, the sound it makes will change. I'll spin this out and just take a look to see if this bearing is in far enough. And sure enough, it looks like it is. So that sound change was the ticket. Spin this off. The outer race, obviously, will only. Alrighty, so the bearing is pulled back in. Oh, there you go. Snap. I think they call this a snap ring because if you're not careful, it goes snap and disappears on you. Put in the pliers. Carefully squeeze until it's the right size. Push it in, release, done. That's in. Now we're going to pull in the hub. I'm going to set that up and then let's get that going. Okay, so I'll show you this setup. This is key. I'll take the camera off the tripod. What we've got set up here is in the back. We've got this cone and all the force is going on the inner race and it won't interfere. So that's being held in place. The hub is lined up in the inner race. The hub is lined up in the inner race here, and I've lubricated. I might put a squirt more on there. And we've got a spacer. I got my wrist pin and my bearing, and I'm going to pull this all together. So the force goes from the hub through this shaft onto the inner race on the opposite side, so none of the balls are squished, and this will all come together. And when it bottoms out, we're done, and then we can start putting stuff back together. I'm gonna squirt some stuff on there and let's tighten it up. Get the axle shaft back in place. Pull down on the control arm to free the hub. I don't know if you can see, you may see when I put it in, but I've cleaned and put some anti-seize on the axle splines. And you don't need to put a lot, but it's good to spread it out. Turning it to match the hub. This is where it gets a bit like a Houdini act. Yeah, I need 4 hands to do this. I may end up having to take the sway bar off. I can't seem to get it aligned and go in at the same time. I'm pulling the control arm down, so if I take the sway bar off, I'll be able to pull it down. It should stay down easier. So I'm going to do that. All right, so I was able to get the sway bar link disconnected. 5mm Allen through the end, cleaned it up, carefully took the nut off, and then I was able to pull this down and get the ball joint to sit properly in the control arm, and the splines came through. I just put the nut on loose here, and we'll draw that in, make sure everything's okay. So now it's just some further with the reassembly. I'll come back to you when I've got the torque. I'm not going to show you everything, but let's get this nut on, get the cotter pin in, and then we'll torque this. It's just raining out. Your egg's getting wet. Well, let's get back to it. Anyway, got the castle nut on, torqued it. I had to go, it was right in between, so I got it up to about 50 foot-pounds. It's supposed to be between 43 and 51. I stopped at about 50, and I'm still not 100%. I need just a little tweak. Let me do that. All right, so got it aligned now. Cotter pin in, and pull it down. You can do this wrench, hammer, whatever. And this part here, I like to push it up and then cut it off, and we'll wrap this around and just nip it off. It's a little longer than I need there. Let's okay. So I'm going to torque the wheel nut, axle nut. Sorry. The axle nut, and torque setting is 138 foot-pounds. Here's the trick: put a screwdriver through the opening in the caliper into the rotor vanes, and that'll keep this from turning. Keep in mind you can always pull more than you can push, so there we go. Once it's tightened, the nut has come back. We've reused the nut. Probably should replace this nut, but didn't have one, so I'm going to put it on, and I'm going to tap this back down. Just for reference, the caliper bolts that hold the caliper bracket onto the hub assembly is 80 foot-pounds. Torque that to 80 foot-pounds, and then a little gentle persuasion, fold this guy in, and this will prevent the nut from unwinding. There we go. That's probably the last use for that guy. All right, so brakes are back on. Sway bar links back on. So I just got the hose bracket to reattach, ABS brackets to reattach, and then we're going to put the wheel back on, and this job is done. Thanks for watching Gary's Garage. Always appreciate you guys that come along today for what we do, and subscribe if you like what we're doing. Thank you very much. Bye.